We're so excited to be talking about imagination. When Charlie, Jane, and I first talked about how we'd like to design this course, we agreed that it would be a good idea to begin by exploring the word imagination and what it means to us. So, Charlie, Jane, why don't you go first? How do you define imagination?
For me, imagination is basically when you're dreaming, but you're actually wide awake. You're daydreaming, sort of. It's the part of you that sees not just what is, but what could be, and that reaches for wonder and possibility instead of just closing off options.
Well, for me, imagination is active hoping, the action that bridges the gap between where we are and what we hope for. Active hope means spending time creating and thinking in your mind or on paper, wherever, about beautiful human relationships and wondrous worlds we can live in. It's saying yes to what is seemingly impossible.
So you just mentioned spending time creating. And to me, creativity starts with tapping into my imagination.
I think imagination can exist passively, and creativity actively brings it to life. For example, I often wonder about which conversations people are having in their own cars. I stare at them in traffic and think about their different lives. I observe how they hold their bodies in relation to the other person, and it helps me imagine if they're flirting, arguing, or joking with each other. These people-watching activities really fuel my imagination. And the moment I start to write about the curious tilt of a child's head or the flirtatious stroke of a woman's finger and translate the relationship I imagined, I'm creating. I add an activity to my imagination and it turns to creativity. I made up stories when I was growing up, and I was always losing myself in plays and books. Until one day I was invited to a TV studio and I saw firsthand how TV shows and films are made. And I remember the smell of the VCR tape and the look of the bulky edit machine, and in that instant I fell in love. It was as if I had suddenly discovered my life's purpose. And after that, all I wanted to do was be a filmmaker, creator, and storyteller. It was like all the years of being a bookworm and telly addict had finally paid off.
I always wanted to make up stories for a living for as long as I can remember. I had a string of jobs that I hated. As a receptionist with a disconnected phone, as a warehouse worker, as a retail clerk, and various other things. And I realized that I was always daydreaming to get through my life, and maybe I could turn that into something. And then I got a job as a journalist, and I found that I always preferred the fanciful version of the story to the real facts I was supposed to be reporting. So I finally went from tinkering with story ideas to making a serious attempt to finish the stories I was writing. Wanuri, do you have any rituals or routines that help you get in the right frame of mind to imagine and create?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The first thing I do when I walk into my office is light incense. Then I brew a pot of tea, and I organize my workspace. And these are the ways I invite my imagination in, and I make space and time for it. For me, these rituals are akin to opening the door for a guest and showing them a place to sit. The everyday sameness of the rituals helps center me, leave old thoughts at the door, and allow me to step into a new world, greet new characters, and lose myself in the story of their lives. Charlie, Jane, what about you? What helps you invite your imagination in?
You know, looking at artwork, listening to music, watching live theater, exercising, playing games, whatever can help jar me out of a literal mindset. My best practice is to take a very long walk, and I sort of noodle in my head about what I'm working on. I can clear my mind and let go of some of the clutter and anxiety. I often find that when I'm in the middle of a good walk, something shakes loose and I suddenly have a really good idea. Something about being outdoors and breathing fresh air and just moving my body just gets me thinking differently. And I'll often see fantastic street art as I walk around, which challenges and inspires me.
A change of scenery definitely helps me as well. When I travel, again, I like to people watch. I watch the way they communicate. I observe the way they use public transport and even what they eat, especially street food. And my travel journals are full of notes about experiences like the ones in cramped taxis in Cameroon, the super grouchy and totally unhelpful public transport assistants in Paris, and the overly bright and suspiciously happy good mornings, y'all, in Austin, Texas. Every travel experience gets woven into the worlds I create and imagine, adding complexity to the characters and richness to the culture. And that's really how my travel helps me exercise my imagination.
You know, one of the best ways I use my imagination is playing with my cat. My cat has a very vivid imagination. He loves to play games where we pretend to hunt. I also use my imagination a lot when I host these spoken word events. Here in San Francisco, I will invent fanciful and fictional bios for all the readers. When I do that, I sit and think about why someone is cool, and I try to turn that into something skewed and silly and a little bit dreamlike and poetic. So, for example, when I introduced Audrey Niffenegger, I thought about how the time traveler's wife made me feel and how much I love her papercraft and her drawings. And so I ended up with a bio about Audrey Niffenegger having been the court artist to an empress who was made out of silhouettes.
Gosh, I want a fanciful bio.
Oh my God, come to San Francisco. We'll make it happen.
So, Charlie Jane, before we wrap up this session of the course, I'd love to offer our learners some additional encouragement to believe in their own imagination and creativity. So what shall we tell them?
We all daydream. We all make up stories all of the time. You literally could not function as a human being without imagination. We use our imaginations to find solutions to everyday problems.
When I create, I use my mundane experiences, my everyday dramas, and the same sweeping emotions that I go through in a day and apply it to my story and my characters and their wants, their needs, and their desires. Imagination is a part of our daily lives, like Charlie Jane said. We don't have the gift of foresight, and since we can't see what is to come, we imagine. Our imagination shapes our futures. We imagine how we'd like our days to go, who we'd like our life partners to be, and what we'd even like to have for dinner. We imagine all the things that could go right and sometimes all the things that could go wrong. But that practice of filling in the blanks is imagination. And my true hope is that you're able to overcome any obstacles you have in yourself that stop you from using your imagination to create.
I really hope you can learn to connect to that spark that is already inside of you all of the time and to cultivate it and listen to it. I really want you to surprise yourself with things that seem to come out of nowhere, but really, they came out of you. So let's try to exercise our imaginations before our next session.
Yep, let's do it.